Welcome to the Charge Forward podcast. I'm your host, Jim Cripps, and I'd like to say special thanks to Nick Hyder and the creative team here at HitLab Studios. Today we have a special guest, Mr. Bobby Hopkins. Bobby, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Now, Bobby, we've known each other for a while.
Right?
In fact, I think our first conversation was the week of Christmas 2008.
Wow.
It was a long time ago.
Yeah.
I think we both had more hair and probably a different shade.
Right.
So one of the things that I'm constantly impressed with you about, I say constantly, but I've seen it several times, and the reason I wanted to have you on the show today is you make transitions in your career almost look effortless. And really what I mean by that is, to put an analogy with it, is a lot of people struggle with the transition or they lose momentum. And I think about it like shifting gears in a car. So for those of us who do know how to drive a manual, when you push the clutch in, the goal is to go ahead and shift and be picking up speed as you go. And a lot of people, that when they push in that clutch, when they go in through that transition, they miss a step or two or they slow down. And it seems like just through your career, you've done a great job of that. What do you attribute that to?
Well, I appreciate that. I feel like that the biggest factor in career and business, and particularly for myself, is that I do everything as a planner. I exhaustively plan, and I do that as a part of goal setting. So when you see me transition and you see it, I've debuted that transition to the world, so to speak. Those have all been something that has either been written down as a goal or that I've been planning for between 2 and 5 years. And some people would say that splits my focus. You know, you're working on thing A and you're planning for thing B. I don't think it splits my focus at all. I think it's all one continuous stream of career, of job, of the ways that we make money, the things we're passionate about. I'm just planning them further ahead than some people are.
That's very insightful. I mean, I think a lot of people make those transitions on emotion, and that absolutely could create more of that stall because they don't really have the plan fully baked.
Well, that's true, and some people that they have to make that in an emergency situation. Somebody told me many years ago, and I worked in the wireless industry for a long time. But they said, you should go interview for another job. Okay, you mean once? No, they said you should interview every month. And for the period of time from about, 1995 until I opened my own business, I interviewed every month for something. Now, a lot of those were jobs I didn't really want, but I got a lot of practice, and I knew what was out there. And so I had things that I could kind of put in the goal-setting process to look at. Maybe someday I want to do this. Maybe someday I want to do that. And I did that all as a part of that interviewing process.
Nice. Well, and does that play into the different facets of your career? Because, and I could get some of these wrong, but I think there was a bowling alley in there at some point.
Right.
Circuit City.
Right.
Nextel, Sprint. Obviously, those were together. Then staying in communications at Cricket, but somewhere along the lines, you got your law degree, and then now you're a travel agent.
Right. So
did I miss any?
You missed a few.
Okay.
As a result of working at Circuit City, I started in the phone business, and in those days I was with Bell South, and I left that, and I was in the GTE Wireless, became Cellular One, became Verizon. So I worked for them, and at one point I managed the bowling center and worked in the wireless business as well. So I had kind of always had law and an involvement in the legal profession in the back of my mind, and I had turned it over. At one point I had a goal written down on that goal sheet that said go to law school. I even took the LSAT, the entrance exam to get into law school. and I never did it. And then I got older and I got in a career and I got some obligations. And, the idea of going back to school while appealing didn't seem possible. But at some point, it still nagged at me on that sheet. So I applied at 40 years of age and went to law school in addition to working, working full time, and graduated and passed the bar. And I practice a little law here and there. I do some things, but it gave me a great understanding, and enhanced the entrepreneurial mindset, and prepared me for other things, for doing some real estate and doing some other things. So yeah.
I don't know what I would. It. Some of them to me, some of them connect, and then some of them don't.
True.
And well, I think that can be true for a lot of people. Sometimes the job is out of necessity, and our career paths were not that dissimilar through some of those stages. In that I started out at Circuit City, and wireless because everybody else hated dealing with them because it took 3 hours in order to process a transaction. And that transitioned into working for the actual telecommunication companies, and that's really kind of where our paths crossed.
Right.
That's awesome. Now these days you're in a far different position. We got Zach is now out of the house, and all those things. One of the things on a personal note that I don't want to say been envious of, but really respected is you had a code with Zach in case he ever got in trouble.
Yeah.
Or if he ever needed to quietly have you come get him out of a situation.
Yeah.
And so do you mind sharing that?
No, not at all. I mean, I told Zach when he became old enough to be going to things without us, and he that if he ever needed me to come and get him out of the situation, that he should text me a particular letter. And if he ever texted it, I would come and get him wherever he was, no matter what, and I would extract him, and it would all be on me. It wouldn't embarrass him. So, I wanted to create a situation where, there's just no harm, no foul. And I've always told him, if you call me before stuff starts turning south, I can usually fix it. If you call me after it's turned south, maybe I can fix it, maybe I can't. But it just gave him a way to text me and tell me, I need you. And, after I didn't think of that idea. I stole that idea somewhere. I saw it. Somebody else did it, said that was a great parenting idea. And I did it with the kids across the street, too, that I was close with. I said, you boys ever need Uncle Bobby to come running? Here's what you text me. And so, it just gives them an out.
Okay. And any of them ever use it?
Not a single time did they ever use it. But, it did open the conversation, particularly with some other people's kids as they would either tell their kids about it. Mm-hmm. It opened some conversations. And, I had I told kids some truths that maybe their parents wanted to tell them, but, your parents aren't as cool. And I was just willing to say it. And so sure. It opened some doors to do that.
That's good. That's good. Again, that one just sticks out as one of those best practices. And, both of us having come from sales backgrounds, it's all about best practices.
Right.
It's about, you hear somebody say it better than you said it. Well, tomorrow you're saying it that way.
That's right.
Or you're adding it to, your list of best practices.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. So kind of backing up a little bit to kind of how you've navigated your career. Did you ever have a mentor? Do you have anybody that really kind of led you down the path or showed you what success looked like?
There are lots of people that I can point to that have mentored me in one way or another. I worked for in my first foray into the wireless business when I was working on commission, not really working directly for a carrier, but working through what we knew as the indirect channel then. Sometimes they call it the agent channel. But I worked for a lady named Melanie Davenport, and I'd gone to college with Melanie, and this was in the wild days when we were selling phones out of the trunks of cars. I mean, we we were just kind of making it up. There weren't really any retail stores. The demand wasn't high enough to justify that. And Melanie, at one point, she opened a retail space, and we moved through different retail spaces. But she really taught me a whole lot about how you would run a business, about how you sell things, about how you do customer service, about how you do the right thing. And one story that really illustrates that is when I was going to open my own stores. Mm-hmm. And I was coming back. Obviously, I was going to do that in Rutherford County. I love Rutherford County, so my stores were going to be centered there. In some ways, they would have been in competition with Melanie's stores because it's a different brand. Some of her customers might have become my customers, and I was concerned about that because I had a lot of respect for her, and I did not want to, step on her toes in any way. And so I went to her before I ever opened the stores and told her what I was planning to do. And, I thought I might get a lukewarm response. We hadn't worked together in many years by that point. And she said, you know what? I've got a whole room full of stuff that you can use. Conference tables, small refrigerators, microwave ovens, desk chairs, all this kind of stuff that you've got to have to open a retail establishment. I said, well, what do you want for it? Oh, just take it. Just gave it to me. Couldn't have been any warmer. And, it shows me that even the person that I looked on as a mentor and a close friend, she even surprised me with her generosity all over again. So it's kind of a neat story.
That's great how you have people that, just surprise you even after you think you know them.
Yeah.
And you went there, being honest and coming to her and letting her know ahead of time, so there's probably, she probably felt a certain way about that too.
Yeah.
So I think it's crazy how many people affect where we end up.
Right.
And how we get there. Now, one of the big things for you that I've seen over the years is your ability to network. Mm-hmm. And, we joke from time to time about, I think even joked earlier with you about getting you out of Rutherford County today. And I think that's partly because you live there, but also because that's where your network is. Mm-hmm. Not that you don't have network elsewhere, but I mean, what all are you involved in currently?
The biggest and the best networking opportunity that exists in most places in the U.S. that I think people in business and people in sales underutilize is the local chamber of commerce. And that's something that I've used throughout my career in Rutherford County. I'm a diplomat for them now, volunteer for them. But even when in the early days of the wireless business, when we were driving long distances to go sell phones, and we might go to Smithville or Lewisburg or Shelbyville, just any number of towns that we might go to sell phones, I always stopped at the Chamber of Commerce and said, what are the networking opportunities here? What events do you have coming up? What can I go to meet people? Because Chamber of Commerce events are one of the few things that you can go and do, and nobody's offended at all. They expect you to talk business. Your family, they might not want you talking business at Thanksgiving. Your church, they really may not want you talking business before the worship service. Certainly civic organizations, some of them have rules against it. The Chamber of Commerce is built for it. So, that's the backbone of my network. The other thing that I do, and I try to do this on a consistent basis, but I try to reach out to 3 people every week that I haven't talked to in some arbitrary period of time. It might be weeks, it might be months, it might even be years. But I try to reach out. Text messaging and social media has made that easier than ever. I'm friends with people on social media that I haven't talked to since high school. But it's an easy way to reach out and say, catch me up on what's going on. And so I try to be very, very deliberate about it. And that's part of that networking. And I try to be open to that when other people reach out to me, even if I can't imagine. Of course, in my transition to this business that I'm in now, I can help almost everybody. But
Right.
even if there's no business to be done, it's still good to stay in touch because you never know when that next change is going to need to start being planned for.
Absolutely. Well, and when you made this change, and mutual acquaintances and friends of ours prepped you for and said, when you sell your business, you're going to have a mild case or a severe case of depression. And I think you've avoided that.
Yeah, I was told that by more than one person, and I have been nothing but delighted to make the change. Not that that wasn't a good business and isn't still a good business, and not that I couldn't still be happy if I were doing that business. It's changed. Mm-hmm. It's changed many, many times over the years. But there's been no depression. I have been excited, and I planned for that for almost 24 months. Mm-hmm. I knew what I was doing next. I knew where I was going to do it, and so I guess that helped me avoid that. And as another point, I've seen people that floundered and struggled and don't understand because their identity was very tied to that business or that job. And I think as another point, it's dangerous to ever get yourself in that position. And it's particularly dangerous when the day comes that for either health reasons or other reasons you can no longer do that. Because if that's what your whole identity was, you will struggle. I watched my dad, who had been in a charge forward kind of person all his life, and he had been in emergency management, and he retired, and he was retired 90 days, and he called me and said, I've got to go find a job, because he needed to work, and he needed a mission, and for him it was always about work. I try to make mine about networking and service and some other things, so that when the day comes that I do hang up the business side of things, I've got something to do.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, even Nick Hyder, who owns this studio, one of the smartest things I've ever heard him say is, that entrepreneurs need to build their personal brand that other things are pieces of or off of, as opposed to building the company as your brand.
Yeah.
I've in my career I've struggled with that. Mm-hmm. I'm one of those people that I have a hard time figuring out where that line is between who I am and what I do. Mm-hmm. And you're right, it makes transitions much harder.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the things that makes your transitions so much smoother, and the methodical side of it, the fact that you plan them out for so long. In fact, I remember when you called me and we sat down that day at Street Coffee.
Yeah.
And you said, all right, Jim, I want to package up and sell this dealership before the end of the year. Now, that could be 1 month, or it could be, in this case, it was early March.
Yeah.
So, a good, right at 10 months. When we walk through that process and getting that one packaged up and sold, is there anything that surprised you that was either harder or easier or more important than you'd previously thought, or maybe that, had calculated?
I wrestled with that sales decision. I wrote my business plan when I was 48 years old. It took me 2 years to go into business. So when you talk about transitions, all that time I was working at another job, and I was focused, knowing where this was going. And I wrote that business plan to be in it for 10 years. I was supposed to sell, and I almost did it like clockwork. I mean, it really happened the way I wrote the business plan. I know they don't all happen that way, but it was just interesting to me. When you talk about surprises, number one, it surprised me how quickly buyers came forward. I thought that I'd have to look a lot harder for a buyer. Mm-hmm. What I had to look a lot harder for was somebody that satisfied the criteria of, the right price and the right that they were going to take everything. I didn't want to sell. I didn't want to piecemeal it. As you said when we talked, I knew I wanted to package it up, and that there would be a day when I would walk away from it. So that was a little surprising. And then once the word got out that they were for sale, it surprised me how many people I had that called me. And it turned out to be a good thing in the end. It's always better to have a lot of people that want to buy something. It creates some price competition.
Sure. Well, I remember that was a point of hesitation for you too, especially in the beginning. You said, I don't want this to get out.
Right.
I want to strategically talk to a couple people. But then really things started happening once it got out.
Right.
And, I think that's why it ended up as good a deal as it did.
It absolutely is why. And I needed my employees to feel good about the process when it got out too. So, that was a whole other thing that had to be managed. And if there was a point of sadness, depression, any of that, it was a couple of my employees had been with me the whole run.
Sure.
I mean, they just became part of my family, and so I was very careful to try to put them in the right spot and in a good spot. As it turns out, neither of them still work for that company. They've both gone on to do other different things, and
Sure.
and they're positive things. But yeah, it was sad leaving them.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they do become part of the team and just part of your world. And in a lot of ways, I mean, your success is because of them.
Right.
And, so whether they would have left beforehand or whether you sold the company, taking care of them it's always important, in my opinion.
Sure.
If you could go back, and we'll have a couple of different questions along this, but if you could go back and tell yourself something about packaging up and selling your business, if we could go back to, say, that day that we sat down at the coffee shop, is there something you'd go back and either warn or say, hey, this is going to be more important than you think it's going to be? Would you give yourself advice about that?
If I could go back to the very beginning of opening my business, there's books of things that I would tell myself, but it specifically relates to being able to sell the businesses. I've coached a lot of people in business. It's always happened informally. My wife keeps saying I need to charge for it, and I'm like, well, it's just something that's interesting to me. I love looking at businesses, and so I do try to pour that advice into younger entrepreneurs and say these are the things to do. And so to get to the answer of your question, if I could tell myself anything, I would almost go back to day one and always be preparing to sell the business. I did things once I realized I was going to sell it. I went through the stores and I took all the stuff out of the stores that didn't need to be in there, and I took it and some of it I sold, some of it I junked. But the stores were so much lighter once you got all the stuff out. I went through the inventory that we had, and we had some stale inventory that we had for years, and I packaged it up and got rid of it. I sold it as a batch, because when it came time, when everything happened, it happened fast.
Sure.
And if I had not been doing that kind of as I went, I should have done a whole lot more of it. I had almost $100,000 worth of phones that had to be returned, and I had to wait on the vendor to credit it back. But that was too much to have at the end of the run. I should have winnowed that down a lot sooner.
Right. Well, I think it's kind of like cleaning your house or a spring cleaning. And when it's your business, sometimes we don't have that same feel, or you have owners that aren't in their stores all the time.
Right.
And then we get used to things.
Yeah.
I remember, if we backed up 15 years ago, we were getting ready for audits.
Right.
And you noticed an old sign up at the top of the Trousdale location. And we'd walked past that. We'd done our own audits probably 15 times.
Right.
Nobody looked up that high.
Yeah.
So what we can get used to is just amazing sometimes.
Yeah. You have your own blind spots, and I used to challenge people to managers and reps, go in and look at that retail space, but even they just had blind spots, and so it was much more useful if I could have a friend in a different business come in, and I would, the times I did it, I would always say, look at this business and understand why everything is where it is. If you don't understand it, ask me. And so as they would go through, we would really, one of the things that came up, we didn't have seating for people to sit down in a chair in the lobbies. We needed that. We have customers that just can't stand at a counter. And so even though it wasn't on the plan, I went and bought some chairs and put in each store. And so that was a blind spot that we just didn't see.
Sure. I think that comes from Mel because we noticed the same thing.
It might be.
I love it. I love it. What advice do you give Zach? As he's growing up, he's in college these days. Looking at what kind of career path he's going to go down. As somebody who's both worked at long-term jobs, then stepped out and become really a serial entrepreneur in the last decade.
Right.
What advice do you give him?
Beyond the advice of the goal setting piece of the puzzle, the advice that my dad gave me, and I did all the way through my career. I started working for money at 15. I had worked. Obviously, I grew up on a farm, so we had worked as little kids, doing little kid things, and sometimes not so little kid things. But
that's right.
The advice he gave me was start saving early. And you hear it if you Google anything to do with finances, they say start saving early, the value of compound interest. But for Zach and his first job, why do I have to enroll in this 401k? And I said, because I'm making you and I'm subsidizing your lifestyle right now, so you have to do it. And it's just the best advice you can give anybody starting out. Put that money away and never touch it. Because when you get to be 50, 55, 60, you're able to look at that steady, a bit
growth
of money, and you're able to be a little more daring. It makes you a little more fearless because you know that, okay, worst comes to worst, I might not live too high on the hog, but I've got some money saved and set aside. And I think that's a great place for an entrepreneur to be, to know that, I've done that all along, and I've done it even in the lean years, even in the leanest of years, I still did it.
Do you think that helped you make the transition between working for somebody and then have open your own company?
Oh, there's no question. There's no question it did, because people that are trying to retire that don't have savings and are dependent on the government's going to save us, or it's just not going to happen.
Right.
You can't live on that. And when you look at what I listened to a presentation by the mayor of Murfreesboro this morning, and somebody was talking about a tax increase from 2018 that was a tax increase that was earmarked for a specific purpose. The question was, are you going to roll that tax increase back? Well, unfortunately, they can't, because inflation, they're holding the line, doing the same services, but inflation has grown so much they can't afford to. And that's the same thing in our personal economies. Inflation's going to get you. And so don't count on that small amount of money to help you.
Now, I know you've got some real estate holdings and those types of things, so you've diversified. What is your favorite? I mean, obviously, you like the 401k as an investment strategy. You stick with mutual funds. What if you were giving Zach advice on his? What would that look like?
Well, I do stick with mutual funds for the most part. And I pay somebody to make those decisions. I did it myself for a lot of years, and I finally decided I did not need to be focused on that. I wanted to have somebody that did it full time, that looked at it every day, all day. And then as another thing, I started investing in real estate. I did that about the same time that I started my business, and have consistently done that year by year as I find a property. Of course, it's hard to find them. There are a lot of people that's a part of their puzzle, but I've added a number of them. I've got 6 units now, and they stay full. I have a waiting list of people that want to move into Rutherford County, and as soon as I have a place, and I'm like, well, don't wait on me to find one.
Sure. And are you predominantly in residential? You're in commercial?
It's all residential so far. I've looked at some commercial pieces, but so far I haven't found one that was ticked all the boxes.
Yeah.
I do have some realtors that have some searches laid out. I've looked at a lot of things, not that are strip centers, but are more office park kind of things.
Yeah. Nice. Well, now that you're a travel agent, now that you've made that transition, I saw just last week you made one of the top lists at Travelmation. Is that right?
Yeah.
And so you're doing things a little bit differently than a lot of people that stick to the, I don't want to say tried and true, but the easy stuff. Your Disney and your local cruises, or outside of the United States or inside the United States type cruises. What's your brand? What are you doing there?
Well, right now, I'm doing a little bit of everything.
Okay.
I have a wide variety of stuff. Because I've been to Europe so many times and I understand Europe so well, I kind of very quickly got into a niche that I knew how to do Europe travel. But I'm really doing a little bit of everything. I couldn't put my finger on one specific thing. The travel business is an interesting business.
Mm-hmm.
The average person who gets into the travel business, about 60% of them wash out in the first 2 years because they don't treat it like a business. If you ask me what I'm doing differently, I'm really trying to treat it like a business. I get up, I put my shoes on, I go upstairs and go to work. And I try to be working the whole time that I've set aside to be there.
Sure.
And that work consists of things that are different for me. I'm doing lots more work on social media. I'm doing lots more work with graphics and layout. And I've had to learn some new skills, which I think is healthy and good as you get into. I said I'm entering the second half of life, and one of my smart friends asked if I was planning to live to be 140, and I said I'm not quite that old yet. But I've learned a new skill set. I'm sure Europe will always be a big part of my package that I'll be selling, but I'm doing lots of all-inclusives. I'm doing lots of just regular Caribbean type cruises. So yeah.
Okay. To me, it seems daunting, and maybe your customers feel the same way. To me, it seems daunting to plan out a 2-week, 3-week European vacation, multiple countries, multiple types of currency, trains, planes, automobiles,
Right.
like all the things. But you seem to have fun with it.
I do, and that's part of what drew me to that as a career change is how much I enjoyed planning my own trips. And one of the interesting things about a travel agent, because I've had somebody just yesterday, she said, "I don't understand your business plan. Well, who uses a travel agent? Why don't people just go book it on their own?" And I said, well, there is more travel booked through travel agents now than at any point in history. And it's because the travel industry has grown so much, and people don't want to put together even a simple vacation, even an all-inclusive vacation where they would, really go in one place and put their credit card in and book the trip. They just don't want to do that because they don't want to learn all those things. And if they are the kind of person, and I do work with some customers who are the planning type person, a travel agent is a great resource, because if they're the kind of person who wants to pick out the specific hotel, the specific time they get there, the specific make of car that picks them up at the airport and drives them to the hotel, I can help them do all that, because I can send them all those choices and say, these have all been vetted. Mm-hmm. When you get there, that's what it's going to look like. And so there's any number of ways. There are a lot of tools. Of course, the internet's a fantastic tool. And I've set my office up where I've got 3 big screens, and so sometimes I have multiple things open as I'm planning one of those trips. And then I can drop all that down into a simple itinerary with all the confirmation numbers, all those things in one space. And yeah, it could be daunting, but I think I'm equal to the task.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, I think it's your attention to detail too. I think one of the misconceptions out there, because I called you I think it was on January 1st and said, hey, I'm looking at this cruise. We're thinking about taking a cruise for the spring break.
Right.
And I didn't know how it worked.
Right.
I didn't know if it was going to cost me more money or less money or, to use you and that kind of thing. And so I gave you the cruise, said, here's what it is. And then you booked it for less than I could find it, even on the January 1st New Year's special.
Right.
And, then you also knew all the things that came along with it, in that you need to book your dinner time, you need to do this, you need to do that. And so I think some of it is just a misconception that it's going to cost me more money to use a travel agent.
Right.
And at least in my experience, it did not. I mean, what do you see across the board?
Well, you're already paying a travel agent anytime you travel. It is already baked into the price that the hotel charges you, the rental car company charges you, even the airline charges you. It's already built in. We're compensated by those things that we book.
Okay.
So it's already in there, and it all things being the same, it should never cost you more to use a travel agent. Now, there are travel agents who will tell you, I'm going to charge a planning fee. It's going to cost you $250 or $500 for me to plan this multi-state road trip for you, make all these reservations. And that's certainly valid. They need to disclose that up front, obviously. With airline tickets, airlines typically don't pay a travel agent to book their ticket. That's very old school that they used to do that. But there are travel agents that will tell you, I'll book your airfare. It's going to cost you $25 a ticket. That's my charge for doing it. That's certainly valid. They should just disclose that up front. At this point, I don't charge anything, and I can't imagine that I ever would. I see this business as a 36-month timeline. In 36 months, all things being the same, I think I will have been able to replace the money that I was earning from my cricket business. So I think I can grow this business to that point, and I won't have any employees.
That's right. Well, and you don't have retail locations. You don't have
any retail
all
locations.
the things that come along with that.
No.
And so the quality of life is different.
It is, and at some point I may have an office away from the house just to have some separation, because it is way too easy to get involved in playing with the dog and realize I've wasted half the afternoon that I should have been working on quotes and sending them out, or marketing, or any of the other things. So I may do that, or I may find a co-working space that I can rent. I don't know. We'll see. That will be another transition.
That will be another transition. So if you were going to give advice to, say, somebody that was considering becoming a travel agent, I know you looked at a lot of different companies, a lot of different models, and I guess start us with why you chose Travelmation.
Okay. There are many people that are in the travel business that will tell you, if you want to be a travel agent, go start you an LLC, start you a corporation, and start calling and setting yourself up as a travel agent. It's doable. It's not complex. You can get they call it an IATA or a CLIA card. Those are just associations that you become a member of, and you can call and you can start setting up who you want to work through, right? Call Disney, and I don't know exactly what Disney's process is. It will no doubt be more complex than some other people's will.
Sure.
But some of them are really, really, really simple. And once you sign up as a travel agent, you send them the tax form so that if they send you money, they can send you a 1099. Once you do that, then you're able to sell that particular brand, that particular cruise line, whatever, fill in the blank for whatever it is. So I knew I didn't want to do that because it was going to be limited in what I could sell by what was set up. I knew I wanted to find either a franchise or an entity that had already done that part of the work for me.
Right.
So Second thing that's big in the travel business is there's lots of network marketers, the multi-level marketing kind of thing where it seems like it's almost more important that you find somebody to sign up than you actually sell any travel.
Sure.
I don't know. That's not for me. I've looked at those businesses because I love looking at businesses. Some people do really, really well in them. It's just not. It's just not what I wanted to do. I wanted to sell travel. I wanted to help people's dreams come true. Is really what I wanted to do. That's the real thing that gets me excited and gets me out of bed in the morning. So I looked at those and could easily say neither of those paths work for me. Then I looked at franchises. Now most of the franchises in the travel space, they vary in price from I think the least expensive one I looked at was about $5,000. They've already done some of the heavy lifting for you. They've already got these relationships in place with different things. Some of them are cruise centric. Cruises a lot of times are the kind of the low hanging fruit because those cruise ships, man, they got to turn over every week, and they need everybody they need the biggest sales force they can have out there.
Absolutely.
So that's some of those franchises are centered around that. Some of them are a more general travel experience where you can kind of pick what your niche is going to be and go with it. I didn't really want to use the franchise model. I had looked at some franchises as I was looking at transitioning out of the wireless business and into something else, and I just didn't like it. I didn't like the continued stream of payments that you sometimes had to make, and I knew that I needed to start this really lean so I could build it the way that I wanted to build it.
Sure.
And so I had a really, really good friend who I had known for many years, and she had been she'd had some other career stuff that she had done, and she had homeschooled her kids, and I just loved both she and her husband. Thought they were great folks, and she had consulted with me because she had some problems with a travel agency that she was involved with, and she had landed at Travelmation, and I could tell from her social media posts that she loved it, and she had done almost all of our personal travel arrangements. Because once I realized somebody was going to do that hassle for me,
Right.
all I had to say was, "Here's what I want to go do, and here's when I want to go do it," and boom, it magically appears, and all I got to do is give you my credit card number. I'm in, right? And so she had done that for us for I don't know how many years, and
you guys took some big boy vacations too.
we did. We had been to Africa. We had been to Europe. We'd been to down the river cruises. I mean, we'd done some stuff, and she was really good at me saying, "We've got 8 days here that we can get away. I don't know where we want to go." And she would come up with 2 or 3 ideas, and so that was where I kind of got interested in the planning piece of it, was when she was able to give me those options and whatnot. But anyway, I'm making this story way too long. I called her and I said, "If you had it to do over again, would you go with Travelmation from the beginning?" And I did that for everybody I know that's in the travel business. Some of them didn't even bother to text me back because I think they knew. I mean, they knew that probably must be thinking about getting in the travel business, and so maybe they didn't want to have that conversation. I don't know, but she was very enthusiastic about it, and helped lead me through some of the questions I should be asking and things I should be looking at, and it was the right space, it was the right place. Travelmation is focused on training, and they provide training opportunities every week. I've got the opportunity just to learn about 6 different vendors, and they might run the gamut from a cruise line to a hotel group. It could be just any number of things, and that's every single week, all year round. So I spend that day learning, and then there are tons of other opportunities to learn. And so even though it's a little like drinking out of a fire hose when you start trying to learn the travel business, I felt like they were uniquely positioned. They also offer certifications. They offer certifications in group travel. It's really important. That's the first one that I earned. They offer certifications in luxury travel. So for your high-end client. How do you sell to them? What kinds of properties are involved in that? And then they offer the newest certification is accessible travel, right? And so for a parent who has maybe a child with autism,
Okay.
very specific needs, very specific things for them to be able to travel. How does a person who uses a wheelchair travel? What does that look like? And what places are set up for that? And so I think it's really says something about who Travelmation is at their heart, that's something that's important to the company. And then just the collaborative nature. There's about 2,000 Travelmation travel agents across the U.S., and I have yet to meet one that didn't offer to help me in any way that they could. And so if I have a client, if you call me and you say, Bobby, I really want to go to Namibia. I mean, I'd have to find Namibia on a map
Right.
first, but I have resources, and I promise you, somebody in Travelmation has sent a client to Namibia, and so they can educate me, so then I can provide you good service.
That's great. That's
Yeah.
great. Well, Bobby, how does somebody find you? How do they work with you?
Well, they can find me on Facebook. They can find me under my personal name and send me a message there. They certainly can call me. My number is 615-533-2951. They can send me a text. They can email me. It's bobbyhopkins@travelmation.net. That M in the middle of Travelmation messes people up. People think it should be Travel Nation, but
Sure.
They came up with that because obviously we're in the travel business, and we are a big partner to Disney. And so animation, they shortened it and they came up with Travelmation. That's
Okay.
how the company was named. And my website is travelmation.net/Bobby Hopkins. So
All right.
there's a theme there.
No, I love it. I love it. And, probably the most excited I saw you get, facial features, those types of things, the whole time we were talking, is when you were talking about making somebody's dreams come true, that dream vacation, and I think maybe that's what kind of sparked that with your travel agent, because sometimes you didn't know where you wanted to go, and she brought ideas.
Mm-hmm. It absolutely is true, and everybody's dream is their dream, and even a regular old vacation. I just quoted one for some folks, and it's not my dream, it's their dream,
Right.
and they're so excited about where they're going and what they're doing, and if you gave it to me free, I'm probably not going there, but it's what they wanted to do.
Sure.
And I can get excited for them, and that's fun. And I can't wait to see their pictures because I know they're going to have a great time.
I love it. Well, Bobby, thanks for coming out and spending some time with me today. Give somebody a best practice about their goal board or their goals. Where did you put them? How did you keep focused on them throughout?
The best practice for setting a goal is you have to write it down. If you don't write it down, you've just got a wish. And wishes are fun, but it's just a wish. It's got to be written down. And no matter how far in the future it is, you have to back up until you get an action that you take today that moves you toward whatever that goal is. And you can do it with anything. I mean, I've challenged people to try me, and then I just back them down until we get, what am I doing today to get to that goal that's 5 years down the road.
So write it down.
Write it down.
Then make the steps backwards, be methodical about it, and then take action today.
Yeah.
I love it. Bobby, thanks for coming out.
Absolutely.
Have a great day. Team, thanks so much for joining us for the very first episode of the Charge Forward podcast. Look forward to other amazing guests. And as always, thanks so much to Nick Hyder and his amazing team at the Hit Lab Studios. And thank you to our sponsors, Sense Custom Development and Charge Forward Solutions. Have a great day. See you soon.